If you feel like the ground beneath your feet is shifting, it's not your imagination. Before we dive into the mechanics of this collapse, do me a favor. If you value your financial sovereignty in an era of digital surveillance, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. The data we are about to discuss is the only thing standing between you and the next great reset. Now, look at your bank account. Then look at the price of a gallon of milk. Then look at the global headlines. If the US dollar was going to fail, you probably expected a cinematic explosion, a stock market crash on a Tuesday morning, or perhaps a declaration of war. But that's not how empires die in the 21st century. They die through a series of quiet bureaucratic handshakes in Beijing and Moscow, and through the slow, agonizing realization that the rest of the world no longer needs permission from Washington to trade. 3 days ago, a signal emerged from the East that most Western media outlets completely ignored. It wasn't a loud threat, it was a mathematical adjustment. China began the final phase of offloading its U.S. Treasury holdings, not in a panic, but with the surgical precision of a predator closing in on a wounded animal. This isn't just about trade wars or tariffs anymore. This is about the fundamental plumbing of the global economy. For 80 years, the American public has lived under the protection of the most powerful financial shield in human history, the petrodollar. It was the agreement that allowed us to export our inflation and import the world's resources for essentially free. But that shield is cracking. When you see China's latest move to settle oil trades in yuan, you aren't just seeing a currency swap. You are seeing the dismantling of the American middle class's purchasing power. We are entering a phase where the U.S. financial system is no longer the house, it's just another player at a table, where the rules have been rewritten overnight. Think about the 1970s, the Nixon shock, the gold standard. We've been here before, but this time, the adversary isn't just a nation-state. It's a decentralized coalition of the world's most resource-rich countries. They have watched our debt climb to $35 trillion, and they have reached a consensus. The dollar is no longer a store of value. It is a liability. This is the moment where reflection becomes survival. Ask yourself, if the world stops buying our debt tomorrow, who pays for the lifestyle we've grown accustomed to? The answer is you, through the most invisible and cruel tax of all, the total collapse of your currency's utility. The mechanism of this collapse follows a 4-stage pattern that has repeated across every empire from Rome to the British Raj, and we have just crossed the threshold into Stage 3. Stage 1 was the decoupling of value from physical assets. Stage 2 was the massive expansion of the money supply to cover systemic rot. We are now in Stage 3, the weaponization of access. When China decides to bypass the SWIFT system, they aren't just avoiding sanctions, they are building a parallel reality. 1. For the average American, this feels like a distant geopolitical chess match, but the reality is much closer to home. Look at the history of the English-speaking world. Our strength was always built on the stability of our institutions and the trust in our contracts. But when that trust is broken, when the world sees that the dollar can be frozen or devalued at the whim of a political administration, they look for the exit. China knows this. Their latest move isn't a strike against our military, it's a strike against our ability to fund it. As they move closer to a gold-backed trade currency, they are forcing a choice upon the global south. Stay with the sinking ship of debt or board the life raft of commodities. This is where the machine learning of history becomes chillingly accurate. In every instance of monetary reset, the population that suffers the most is the one that believed the old system was permanent. We have been conditioned to believe that the Federal Reserve has a soft landing planned. But there is no soft landing when the runway is being dismantled by your largest creditor. China has been hoarding gold at a record pace for 24 consecutive months. Why? Because they know that in a crisis, price stops being a number and becomes a gate. If you don't own the asset, you don't get through the gate. We are seeing a massive transfer of wealth from the West to the East, hidden behind the noise of political theater. The economic detail here is crucial. As the demand for U.S. Treasuries drops, the interest rates we must pay to attract buyers skyrocket. This creates a death spiral where we must borrow more just to pay the interest on what we already owe. It is a mathematical trap with no exit. The English-speaking world has overcome crises before: the Great Depression, 2 world wars, the stagflation of the 70s, but those were challenges of production. This is a challenge of existence. We are facing a reality where the full faith and credit of the United States is being questioned by the very people who used to bankroll it. UN's assent. China builds a parallel financial order. Policy circle. A key strength of the UN's international assent lies in China's determination to construct parallel payment and settlement infrastructure, reducing reliance. The final stage of this transition is the most dangerous, and it's the one we are entering right now. It is the stage where the domestic population realizes that the rules of the game have changed, but they no longer have the chips to play. When China's latest move pushes the system closer to collapse, the internal reaction in the U.S. won't be a return to sound money. It will be an acceleration of control. We will see the introduction of central bank digital currencies as a solution to the very crisis the system created. This is the ultimate hook. They will tell you it's for your safety, for efficiency, for social equity, but it is actually the final enclosure of your financial freedom. History shows that when an empire can no longer control the world, it settles for controlling its own people. Reflect on the pioneers, the builders of the Western world, the individuals who understood that true wealth is not a number on a screen, but the ownership of tangible assets and the sovereignty of the mind. We are at a crossroads. One path leads to the quiet acceptance of a managed decline, where your savings are liquidated by inflation and your movements are tracked by a digital ledger. The other path requires a radical reassessment of what it means to be financially prepared. The window of opportunity to position yourself is not closing with a countdown timer. It is closing with the quiet click of a door being locked. As China continues to push, the cracks in our system will become chasms. You need to understand that this isn't a market correction. It is a tectonic shift. The era of easy American dominance is over, and the era of the great realignment has begun. If this analysis has stirred something in your gut, if it has made you look at the world with a different lens, then the work has begun. Don't let this be just another video you scroll past. Take this information, study the patterns, and protect what you have built. If you want to stay ahead of the administrative machine and understand the next move before it happens, make sure you've joined our community. Your future depends on your ability to see the signals through the noise. This is Harrison Cole, and I'll see you in the next breakdown of the system. They do not want you to understand. Now, we must look at the battlefield that no one is talking about, the logistics of the transition. When an empire loses its grip on the world's reserve currency, it doesn't just lose its wealth, it loses its priority. For decades, being an English-speaking nation meant being at the front of every line. If there was a shortage of energy, the dollar ensured we were served first. If there was a shortage of grain, our currency commanded the ships. But as China's latest move pushes the system into a full-scale reset, that priority is evaporating. We are seeing the birth of what historians will call the two worlds economy. On one side, you have the paper world, the world of Wall Street, complex derivatives, and the $35 trillion debt pile that the Federal Reserve desperately tries to manage. On the other side, you have the physical world, the world of oil, copper, lithium, and gold. This is where China and the BRICS nations have spent the last decade building their fortress. They aren't just trading currency, they are locking down the physical arteries of the planet. When the Saudis agreed to trade oil for UN, they aren't just snubbing Washington. They are redirecting the flow of the world's most vital resource away from the West. For the average American, this means the era of cheap everything is officially over. Reflect on this for a moment. Our entire societal structure is built on the assumption that global resources will always flow toward the dollar. If that flow reverses, the very architecture of our cities, our transport, and our food systems becomes unsustainable overnight. This is the crisis mode that the administrative machine won't explain to you. They will call it supply chain disruptions or transitory inflation, but those are just euphemisms for a loss of global status. The English-speaking world has always thrived on being the arbiter of trust and the master of the seas. But when you can no longer back your currency with anything other than a promise to print more of it, trust becomes a luxury you can no longer afford. China's strategy is surgical because it attacks the one thing the U.S. cannot print, time. They are waiting for the moment when the interest payments on our debt exceed our entire defense budget, a moment that is already here. This is why you must understand the difference between a currency and money. A currency is a tool of the state. Money is a tool of the individual. As the state's tool fails, your only defense is to return to the money of the ages. The pattern is clear, the signals are flashing red, and the window to act is narrowing with every ship that leaves a western port empty. If you've stayed with me this far, you are already ahead of 99% of the population. But knowledge without action is just entertainment. If you are ready to stop being a spectator in your own financial decline, make sure you hit the like button to tell the algorithm that this truth matters. Share this with one person who still thinks the system is working in their favor. We are moving into a period of history where the only thing more valuable than gold will be the clarity to see the truth before the rest of the world wakes up. Stay vigilant, stay prepared, and remember, in a crisis, the person with the most information isn't the winner. The person who acted on the right information is. This is Harrison Cole, signing off on the most important transition of our lifetime.